The seventh year of devastating drought had turned Oakridge Farm into an emblem of climate disaster rather than the thriving homestead it once was. The once fertile acres that Jacob Miller's great-grandmother had purchased during the land rush of 1901 now stood parched and barren, the groundwater having receded to depths no conventional well had been able to reach. What Jacob would discover beneath those dusty fields wouldn't just save his family legacy, it would fundamentally challenge humanity's understanding of its own history and potential. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jacob stood at the edge of his dried-up pond, the cracked mud. Beneath his boots, a stark reminder of how dire their situation had become. At 42, his weather-beaten face had settled into permanent lines of worry. His strong shoulders, built through decades of physical labor, now slumped with the weight of impending failure. "It's not looking good, Rusty," he said to the aging border collie at his heels. The dog whined softly, pressing against his leg as they walked toward the eastern section that had been selected for the desperate last attempt at finding water. The Miller family had survived the Dust Bowl, weathered the farm crisis of the 1980s, and adapted to changing markets for generations. But 5 consecutive years of drought, a catastrophic crop failure last season, and steadily rising equipment costs had pushed Oakridge Farm to the brink of collapse. Jacob climbed onto his pickup truck, the once shiny red paint now dulled by sun and dust. The well-drilling equipment he'd mortgaged the last of his savings to rent waited to be used in a final attempt to tap into the deep aquifer that geological surveys suggested might exist beneath his property. 300 feet down, he muttered, as he fired up the engine. "That's what we need to hit to keep this place alive." The bank's latest notice had arrived yesterday, giving him 60 days to make a substantial payment or face foreclosure. The letter had ended with a handwritten note mentioning that Nexus Development Corporation had expressed significant interest in acquiring the property, a thinly veiled suggestion that Jacob should consider selling. The eastern section had been largely ignored by the Millers for generations. His grandmother had claimed there was something unusual about the soil composition, too dense for farming, but oddly structured for natural formation, she'd insisted. Jacob's father had simply declared it a waste of good effort and focused on the productive western fields instead. But now, with water sources depleted in the reliable sections and no rainfall in sight, Jacob had no choice but to attempt drilling where his ancestors had avoided. The deeper the drill bit went, the more unusual the soil samples became. Jacob had expected typical sedimentary layers, but instead encountered increasingly dense stone-like material that couldn't be explained by the region's known geology. At 110 feet, when the specialized drill bit suddenly dropped through unexpected empty space, Jacob immediately shut down the equipment. "What on earth?" he muttered, peering down the shaft. The drill camera showed what appeared to be a hollow chamber with smooth stone walls, clearly not a natural formation. The sound of tires on gravel announced a visitor. A sleek black SUV bearing Nexus Development Corporation's logo pulled up. Alongside the barn, Diana Reynolds, Nexus's chief acquisitions officer for nearly a decade, stepped out. She knew every struggling farmer in 4 counties by name and could recite their property values from memory. Her grandfather had been a tenant farmer who had lost everything in the 1950s drought, giving her what she claimed was a special appreciation for the challenges facing independent farms. Today, her normally friendly expression was replaced with professional detachment as she approached. "Jacob," she greeted him with a nod. "I wish this was just a social call." "Another offer?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. She handed him an envelope. 20% above our last proposal. That's all the increase I could get approved. Corporates eager to consolidate holdings in this valley before the new reservoir project goes online. He took the envelope without opening it. Thanks for trying, Diana. She glanced at the drilling equipment. Have you considered Dr. Harrison's theory about your property? Jacob's jaw tightened. Dr. Philip Harrison, president of the State Geological Society and Nexus's consultant, had been making increasingly insistent requests to survey Oakridge Farm. His latest communication had suggested anomalies consistent with pre-settlement subterranean structures in the eastern section, a claim Jacob found conveniently aligned with Nexus's interests. I'm not giving Harrison access to my property, he said flatly, not while I still have options. Diana's expression softened slightly. Jacob, I understand the farm's been in your family for generations, but at some point you have to face reality. That section has never been productive, and Harrison's preliminary scans suggest... I'll make it productive, he interrupted. Today, that's why I rented the drilling equipment. She sighed. Just don't wait too long to consider alternatives. Our offer won't stay on the table indefinitely. After Diana left, Jacob stood motionless. Beside his truck, the corporate offer crumpled in his fist. Rusty pressed against his leg, offering silent comfort. That evening, after reviewing the farm's finances and finding no path to solvency without water, Jacob climbed to the attic. Dust motes danced in the beam of his flashlight as he made his way to an old cedar chest tucked beneath the eaves. The chest had belonged to his great-grandmother, Sophia Miller, who had claimed this land after fleeing the devastation of her homeland in Eastern Europe. Family legend held that Sophia had used unconventional knowledge, unusual for farmers of that era, to select this particular property, passing up seemingly better land elsewhere. Jacob lifted the heavy lid, revealing leather-bound journals. Unusual. Measuring instruments and curious artifacts, carefully labeled in faded handwriting. He hadn't examined these materials since inheriting the farm, viewing them more as family heirlooms than resources. The earliest journal, dated 1901, detailed Sophia's methodical search for land with specific characteristics, May 3rd, 1901. I'm convinced a significant anomaly exists in the eastern section of this unclaimed parcel. The old indigenous stories speak of a chamber of ancient wisdom in this valley that was sealed during the Great Earthquake. White settlers dismiss such tales, but my experience with the knowledge keepers of my homeland has taught me to respect such traditions. Jacob flipped forward. June 12, 1901. Acquired the full 240 acres today. Agent thought me peculiar for selecting this particular section, as the eastern portion appears unsuited for agriculture. If he knew my true interest lay not in the surface, but in what may lie beneath, he would think me madder still. His great-grandmother had apparently selected the property specifically because of something beneath the eastern section. He continued reading. July 8, 1901. Initial measurements confirm my suspicions. The subterranean formation follows too precise a pattern to be natural. My calculations indicate a chambered space approximately 100 ft below surface level. The indigenous legends may have basis in fact. July 23, 1901. Professor Whitfield visited today, expressing unusual interest in purchasing the eastern section, offered twice the going rate per acre. When I declined, his manner turned cold, mentioned that his historical society had prior claim to any findings of significance in the county, and that I would be wise to accept his generosity. Jacob sat back, his mind racing. A chambered space beneath the eastern section. His great-grandmother had apparently detected some kind of underground structure, but had kept the discovery private. And a professor had shown interest in the property even then. Could this explain Dr. Harrison's persistent interest, a continuation of his predecessor's attention from more than a century ago? The possibility gave Jacob renewed purpose. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If he could find evidence of whatever Sophia had detected, he might secure financial assistance through historical preservation programs or negotiate with Nexus from a position of strength rather than desperation. The next morning, Jacob prepared to continue the drilling operation with a new perspective. He studied his great-grandmother's journals one more time, noting areas where Sophia had mapped the strongest anomalies, then marked those sections on a current survey map. As the sun climbed higher, Jacob started the drilling equipment again and continued toward the mysterious chamber. He didn't notice the drone that briefly hovered over his property, its camera zooming in on his activities, or the urgent phone call being made to Nexus Development Corporation's executive offices. For 2 days, Jacob worked from dawn until dusk. The specialized drilling equipment slowly penetrated the unusual stone-like material, protecting whatever lay below. The work was punishing. The unexpected density required constant adjustments and manual monitoring. Each evening he would collapse into his grandmother's old rocking chair, muscles aching, hands blistered despite his work gloves, and read more from Sophia's journals for guidance. On the 3rd day, as Jacob guided the drill across a particularly stubborn section that Sophia had marked with special attention in her survey notes, something changed. The drill, which had been meeting consistent resistance, suddenly broke through into an open space. The monitoring equipment showed a cavity, at least 20 feet high. "This is it," Jacob whispered, shutting down the equipment immediately. He assembled his inspection equipment, a reinforced camera system designed for well inspection that could be lowered into the narrow shaft. As the camera descended past the drill hole, Jacob watched the monitor with increasing amazement. The walls of the shaft gave way to a large open chamber with perfectly squared corners and smooth walls. Clearly not a natural formation. "My God," he breathed as the camera continued to descend. The chamber was roughly circular, perhaps 40 feet in diameter, with a ceiling that arched to a central point. The walls appeared to be made of a seamless, stone-like material, but unlike any masonry Jacob had ever seen. There were no visible joints or mortar lines, as if the entire chamber had been carved from a single massive stone. But it was what stood at the center of the chamber that caused Jacob's breath to catch. The camera revealed what appeared to be a raised platform or dais, upon which rested several geometric structures. They seemed to be made of the same stone-like material as the chamber walls, but with polished surfaces that reflected the camera's light. Jacob carefully maneuvered the camera for a closer look at the structures. They appeared to be arranged in a specific pattern, concentric circles surrounding a central column. Each structure was covered in symbols or writing unlike anything he recognized, not hieroglyphics or any ancient script he'd ever seen, but precise geometric patterns that suggested both mathematical precision and deliberate communication. "This can't be possible," he muttered, taking screenshots of everything the camera revealed. The age alone was baffling. If Sophia's assessment was correct, and this chamber predated European settlement, it represented technological capabilities far beyond what was believed possible for pre-Columbian civilizations in North America. The precision of the stonework, the geometric arrangements, the mathematical symbols, all suggested a level of sophistication that challenged conventional archaeological understanding. As Jacob continued to explore with the camera, he noticed something even more perplexing. Some of the geometric structures appeared to contain what looked like mechanisms, moving parts that seemed to respond to the camera's light or movement. One structure in particular, a dodecahedron positioned at the exact center of the arrangement, appeared to emit a faint luminescence when the camera light passed across it. The rational part of Jacob's mind scrambled for explanations. Perhaps the surfaces were simply highly reflective. Perhaps the apparent movement was just a trick of light and shadow. But as he continued to study the footage, the evidence became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Whatever lay beneath his farm represented a discovery of potentially extraordinary significance. After several hours of remote exploration, Jacob realized he needed expert help to properly understand what he had found. But who could he trust? Dr. Harrison and Nexus would surely attempt to seize control of the site. Government authorities might cordon off his entire farm for years of study. Local universities might lack the specialized knowledge needed to properly assess such an unusual find. As he pondered his options, Jacob remembered a name from a regional archaeology conference he had attended years ago when the farm was doing well, and he had pursued his amateur interest in local history. Dr. Leila Ahmadi, an archaeologist specializing in anomalous historical sites, places that didn't fit neatly into conventional historical narratives. She had given a compelling presentation about archaeological outliers that challenged established timelines and technological capabilities of ancient civilizations. Jacob searched for her online and discovered she was now working as an independent researcher. After leaving her university position under controversial circumstances, she had publicly criticized the academic establishment for suppressing evidence that contradicted orthodox historical narratives. "Perfect," Jacob murmured. Someone who already stood outside the conventional academic power structures might be exactly the ally he needed. The sound of a vehicle approaching pulled Jacob away from the computer. Through the window, he saw Diana Reynolds' SUV coming up the driveway again, but this time she wasn't alone. Dr. Philip Harrison sat in the passenger seat, and behind them followed two more vehicles bearing Nexus Development logos. "That didn't take long," Jacob muttered. The drone surveillance must have revealed something significant enough to prompt an immediate response. He quickly closed the drilling equipment control panel and covered the shaft opening with a tarp and equipment cases, making it appear like ordinary maintenance work. As Diana and Harrison approached, Jacob steeled himself for the confrontation. He had just found something that might save his farm and possibly rewrite history. He wasn't about to let Nexus take control of it without a fight. "Jacob," Diana called as she approached, her tone deliberately casual. "We were in the area checking another property and thought we'd stop by. Dr. Harrison was hoping to discuss some geological features he's particularly interested in on your eastern section." Dr. Harrison stepped forward, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the carefully cultivated appearance of academic authority. "Mr. Miller, I understand you've been doing some rather deep drilling. Finding anything unusual?" Jacob maintained a neutral expression, careful not to reveal his excitement or concern. "Just trying to find water, Dr. Harrison. Drought's hitting everyone hard this year." Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed, though your choice of drilling location is interesting. Most geological surveys would suggest the western section would be more promising for groundwater." "Family knowledge," Jacob replied simply. "My grandmother always said there was something different about the soil composition here." Harrison exchanged a glance with Diana. "Your grandmother was quite right. This section has unique properties. Our preliminary scans indicate unusual density variations consistent with non-natural formations. We'd be very interested in conducting a more thorough examination." "I appreciate your interest," Jacob said carefully, "but as I told Diana yesterday, I'm not opening my property to outside surveys at this time." Harrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Miller, I don't think you understand the significance of what might be beneath your land. If my theories are correct, this site could have extraordinary historical importance, and that's exactly why Nexus wants to buy my property at a bargain price, isn't it?" Jacob countered. "To control whatever might be down there?" Diana intervened. her corporate smile firmly in place. "Jacob, we're prepared to offer you a collaborative arrangement. Full market value for the property, plus a generous consulting fee to remain involved in any discoveries. Dr. Harrison's research team would handle the scientific work, while you could maintain residence in the farmhouse and receive appropriate recognition." The offer was cleverly crafted, seemingly reasonable and respectful of his connection to the land. But Jacob couldn't help noticing they were already discussing the site, as if his discovery was confirmed, though he'd said nothing. "About finding a chamber. I'll consider your proposal," he said non-committally. "But right now, my priority is finding water and saving my farm, not archaeological surveys." After they departed with reluctant acceptance of his position, Jacob returned to the house and immediately contacted Dr. Ahmadi. To his surprise, she answered on the first ring. "Dr. Ahmadi, this is Jacob Miller. I own a farm in Oakridge Farm in Valley County," she completed his sentence. "Yes, Mr. Miller. I've been expecting your call." Jacob paused, confused. "You've been expecting me?" "Let's just say certain geological anomalies in your region have been of interest to independent researchers for decades. When I received alerts about unusual drilling activity at precisely the coordinates most promising for subsurface structures, I hoped someone had finally found something significant." Jacob was simultaneously reassured and concerned by her awareness. "How many others are monitoring this area?" "More than you might expect, Mr. Miller, including your visitors from Nexus, I imagine. What exactly have you found?" Jacob hesitated, still uncertain how much to reveal over the phone. "Something that shouldn't be possible. Something that challenges everything we thought we knew about this region's history. I can be there tomorrow morning," Dr. Ahmadi replied without hesitation. "And Mr. Miller, secure the site however you can. There are powerful interests who have been searching for precisely what I believe you found." After hanging up, Jacob returned to his great-grandmother's journals, searching for any additional information that might help him understand what he'd discovered. The later entries provided disturbing context. September 3rd, 1901, Whitfield. Returned today with 2 colleagues. They attempted to survey the eastern section without permission while I was in town. Thomas confronted them, and they claimed to be performing county assessments. Their instruments were unlike any survey equipment I've seen. October 17th, 1901. The Historical Society has filed a petition claiming portions of my land contain significant geological features of scientific interest that should be subject to study and potential preservation. Their legal filing contains remarkably accurate details about subsurface formations they could not possibly know without trespassing and conducting unauthorized surveys. December 4th, 1901. I have decided to permanently conceal the presence of the chamber. The shaft I dug to confirm its existence has been carefully filled and disguised. The Society's persistent interest and increasingly aggressive tactics convince me that whatever lies beneath must be protected until it can be properly understood. By those with wisdom, rather than merely ambition, the entries continued through decades, documenting ongoing attempts by what Sophia called the Order of Historical Truth to gain access to the property through various front organizations and individuals. The consistency of their interest over multiple generations suggested a level of institutional knowledge and determination that was deeply unsettling. Particularly troubling was an entry from 1954, April 9th, 1954. A man claiming to represent the State Water Authority attempted to gain permission for deep drilling on the eastern section. When James refused, he became threatening, suggesting certain tax reassessments might be forthcoming as he had friends in the county assessor's office. The organization's methods grow bolder while remaining invisible to public scrutiny. Jacob, was struck by the parallels to his current situation with Nexus and Dr. Harrison. Was this the same organization operating under a new name? Had they somehow maintained institutional knowledge about the chamber for over a century? Outside, night had fallen. Jacob secured the drilling site as best he could, covering the equipment with tarps and positioning his truck to block the most direct approach. He brought Sophia's journals and artifacts into the kitchen, spreading them across the table for more detailed study. Among the artifacts was a device unlike anything Jacob had seen before, a palm-sized metallic disc with concentric rings that rotated around a central blue stone. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The metal worked with precision impossible for turn-of-the-century technology. Small symbols etched along the rings resembled those he had seen on the structures in the underground chamber. As Jacob carefully manipulated the disc, he noticed that certain alignments of the rings caused the central stone to emit a faint blue luminescence. When he aligned all the rings in a specific configuration indicated by markings on the outer edge, a pattern of light appeared, projecting what looked like a star chart onto the kitchen table. "Impossible," Jacob whispered, though the evidence was before his eyes. The projection showed celestial bodies, but in alignments Jacob didn't recognize from any modern astronomical chart. Either this was a completely fictional representation, or it showed the night sky from a time far in the past, or possibly the future. Sophia's journal provided context. An entry from 1902 described her first successful activation of the device. Artifact responds to specific alignments corresponding to celestial positions. When properly configured, it generates a projection, I believe, represents the sky as it appeared when the chamber was sealed. By my calculations, this would date the chamber to approximately 9,500 years before present, a time when, according to conventional history, no such technology or astronomical knowledge should have existed on this continent. Dr. Layla Ahmadi arrived shortly after dawn in a dust-covered jeep that had clearly seen its share of remote research sites. She was younger than Jacob had expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with keen, dark eyes and an intensity that suggested constant analysis of her surroundings. She wore practical field clothes and carried specialized equipment in a weathered backpack. "Mr. Miller," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for contacting me. Few people would have the wisdom to proceed cautiously with a discovery of this nature." "Jacob, please," he replied, shaking her hand. "And I'm not sure wisdom had much to do with it. More like generations of family suspicion about outside interests." She smiled slightly. "Healthy skepticism is an underrated virtue. Now show me what you found." Jacob led her to the drilling site, explaining his great-grandmother's journals and the century of institutional interest in the property as they walked. Dr. Ahmadi listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions about specific dates and the names mentioned in Sophia's writings. "The order of historical truth," she said thoughtfully when he described the organization that had pressured his ancestors. "They've operated under various names throughout the last century: the Historical Society, the Antiquarian Circle, the Heritage Foundation, and now, I suspect, they have connections within Nexus Development." "You know about them?" Jacob asked, surprised. "I've encountered their influence throughout my career. They maintain the appearance of legitimate historical research while suppressing discoveries that contradict conventional narratives. Their core belief appears to be that certain knowledge should remain controlled by a select few rather than being openly studied." At the drilling site, Jacob removed the coverings to reveal the narrow shaft he had created. The camera showed a chamber about 20 feet high and 40 feet in diameter, with geometric structures arranged in the center. Dr. Ahmadi studied the shaft opening, then began unpacking specialized equipment. "A camera provides limited information. We need to physically access the chamber for proper documentation. Is that safe? Jacob asked. The shaft is narrow, and we don't know if the air is breathable. She held up what looked like a modified gas detector. We'll test everything first. I've explored similar sites before. She paused, meeting his eyes directly. Similar, but nothing quite like this. If your camera footage is accurate, this could be the most significant architectural find in North American archaeology. Over the next several hours, they worked methodically to widen the shaft and secure a safe descent system. Dr. Ahmadi's equipment included expandable shaft supports, air quality monitors, and a lightweight aluminum ladder system that could be assembled in sections. By mid-afternoon, they had created an access point wide enough for careful descent and confirmed that the chamber's atmosphere was safe. Dr. Ahmadi insisted on being the first to descend, methodically checking each ladder section as she made her way down. Jacob watched anxiously from above until he heard her voice echo up the shaft, filled with unmistakable awe. "Jacob, you need to see this. It's extraordinary." He descended, carefully, the beam of his headlamp illuminating the smooth stone walls of the shaft. As he neared the bottom, the shaft opened into the vast chamber he had glimpsed through the camera, but the reality was far more impressive than the limited video had suggested. The chamber was perfectly circular, its walls seamless as if carved. From a single massive stone, the ceiling arched gracefully to a central point, creating remarkable acoustics that carried even whispered sounds with perfect clarity. The floor was polished to a mirror-like finish, inlaid with concentric circles of varying materials that emanated from the central platform. Dr. Ahmadi stood near the center, her expression one of professional amazement as she slowly turned to take in the entire structure. "The precision is impossible," she said quietly. "Even with modern laser-cutting technology, creating a seamless curved structure of this size would be extraordinarily difficult." But it was the geometric structures on the central platform that dominated their attention. Up close, they were even more remarkable than they had appeared on camera. 12 stone objects of varying geometric shapes, spheres, cubes, pyramids, and more complex polyhedrons arranged in precise relationship to one another. Each was covered in the same intricate symbols, patterns that suggested both mathematical formulas and what might be language. "These aren't just decorative," Dr. Ahmadi said, carefully circling the arrangement without touching anything. "This appears to be some kind of instrument, a device designed for specific purpose." In the center of the arrangement stood the dodecahedron Jacob had noticed on the camera feed. Up close, it was clearly different from the other structures. Its material had a subtle translucency, and the symbols etched into its 12 pentagonal faces appeared to shift slightly as they moved around it. An optical effect Jacob couldn't explain. "This material isn't stone," Dr. Ahmadi said, carefully examining the dodecahedron without touching it. "It has properties more similar to crystal or glass, but unlike any I've encountered in archaeological contexts." As they continued their initial documentation, taking photographs and measurements of every aspect of the chamber, Jacob noticed something he hadn't been able to see on the camera footage. Near the chamber's perimeter, opposite the entrance shaft, was what appeared to be a doorway, an arched opening leading to a dark passage beyond. "There's more to this site than just this chamber," he said, directing his light toward the passage. Dr. Ahmadi nodded, her excitement evident despite her professional composure. "A complex rather than a single chamber. This reinforces the hypothesis that we're looking at a deliberately constructed facility rather than merely a ceremonial space." As they approached the passage, Jacob's headlamp illuminated what appeared to be a series of symbols carved above the archway. Dr. Ahmadi gasped softly, stepping closer to examine them. "These are celestial coordinates," she whispered. "Star positions, but configured in a system I've never encountered in any known ancient astronomy." The passage led to a second, smaller chamber that caused even Dr. Ahmadi to fall momentarily silent. Unlike the geometric precision of the main chamber, this room contained what could only be described as technology, though unlike any technology Jacob had ever seen. At the center stood what appeared to be a mechanism, a complex arrangement, of the same crystalline material as the dodecahedron, interspersed with metallic components that curved and flowed in organic patterns. The entire apparatus was oriented toward a circular opening in the ceiling that, Jacob realized, must extend all the way to the surface, cleverly concealed among the rocks and soil of the eastern section that had frustrated farmers for generations. "It's an observatory," Dr. Ahmadi breathed, her scientific detachment momentarily giving way to wonder, but combined with something else, something I can't even begin to classify with current archaeological terminology. As they studied the mechanism, Jacob noticed that certain components seemed to respond to their presence, subtle movements and shifts that couldn't be explained by air currents or vibration. One crystalline rod in particular appeared to emit a faint luminescence when Dr. Ahmadi's light passed across it at a specific angle. "It's still active," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After thousands of years, it's still functioning." The implications were staggering. Not just an ancient structure of unexpected sophistication, but a technological system that remained operational after millennia, suggesting principles and knowledge far beyond what conventional history attributed to any civilization in North America at that time period. As they documented the second chamber, Jacob remembered the artifact from his great-grandmother's chest, the disc with concentric rings that had projected the star chart. "I have something you need to see," he told Dr. Ahmadi, "something that I think connects directly to this mechanism." Before they could return to the main chamber, both froze at the sound of voices echoing from above, muffled but clearly coming from the surface near their entry shaft. "Someone's at the shaft," Jacob whispered, immediately dousing his headlamp. "Doctor." Ahmadi switched off her light as well, plunging them into near-total darkness, save for the faint glow emanating from the mechanism. "Is there another way out?" she asked quietly. "Not that I know of," Jacob replied. "My great-grandmother mentioned concealing the original shaft, but I don't know where it was located." They moved silently back toward the main chamber, staying close to the wall to avoid the central platform with its geometric structures. The voices from above grew clearer. At least 3 different people, one of whom Jacob recognized as Dr. Harrison. Clearly a recent excavation. Miller must have discovered the chamber. "How far down does it extend?" Initial scans suggested approximately 20 feet to the main cavity. The imaging was imprecise due to the unusual density of the surrounding material. "Is the equipment ready?" "Yes, sir. We can begin documentation immediately." Dr. Ahmadi gripped Jacob's arm, pulling him toward the far side of the chamber. "They're preparing to descend," she whispered. "We need to either confront them or conceal ourselves." Jacob considered their options. Direct confrontation on his property would normally be his right, but in the confined space of the underground chamber, with unknown individuals accompanying Harrison, the situation could quickly become dangerous. "There," he said, pointing to a section of the wall where the curvature created a shadowed alcove behind one of the supporting pillars. "We can observe from there while deciding our next move." They positioned themselves in the shadows, just as a light appeared in the shaft opening. A rope ladder unfurled, followed by the beam of a powerful flashlight sweeping the chamber. Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi pressed deeper into the alcove, watching as 3 figures descended into the chamber. Dr. Harrison was first, followed by a man Jacob didn't recognize. Tall, military in bearing despite his civilian clothes, with the confident movements of someone accustomed to authority. The third was a younger woman carrying sophisticated scanning equipment, her focus immediately on the geometric structures at the center of the chamber. "Remarkable," the unknown man said, his voice carrying clearly in the chamber's perfect acoustics. "The Foundation's record suggested something significant, but this exceeds all expectations." Harrison approached the central platform, shining his light on the geometric structures. "The similarities to the Yucatan site are unmistakable, Director Walsh, though this appears to be in far better condition." "The chronology is consistent as well," the woman added, activating her scanning equipment. "Preliminary dating suggests the same approximate period, 9,500 to 10,000 years before present." Director Walsh, clearly the leader, circled the chamber with measured steps. "And Miller? Where is he now?" "Unknown," Harrison replied. "His vehicle is still on the property, but he wasn't present when our team arrived. He may have gone for supplies or assistance." "Ahmadi," Walsh said suddenly. "Has he contacted Layla Ahmadi?" The question sent a chill through Jacob. How did they know about his contact with Dr. Ahmadi? Harrison shook his head. "We have no confirmation, but it seems likely. Her research interests align precisely with this discovery, and she's been monitoring our activities in this region for years." "That complicates matters," Walsh said, his tone hardening. "She has connections with organizations that would oppose our proper management of this discovery, accelerate the timetable. I want full documentation before local authorities can be alerted or legal complications arise." The woman stepped forward. "Sir, proper archaeological protocol would require—" "Dr. Chen," Walsh interrupted, "this site falls under Special Directive 7. Standard archaeological protocols are superseded by security considerations. Proceed with comprehensive scanning." From their hiding place, Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi exchanged glances. Whatever Special Directive 7 was, it clearly authorized these people to bypass normal scientific and legal procedures. Dr. Chen began setting up additional equipment, including what appeared to be ground-penetrating radar and some kind of spectrographic analyzer. Harrison assisted, while Walsh continued to examine the chamber with methodical attention. "The passage," he said suddenly, directing his light toward the archway Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi had explored earlier. "The records mention a secondary chamber." As Walsh moved toward the passage, Dr. Ahmadi touched Jacob's arm and nodded toward the shaft entrance. With the three intruders focused on the secondary chamber, they might have a chance to reach the surface. Carefully, they edged along the wall toward the shaft. They had nearly reached it when Walsh emerged from the passageway, his light sweeping the main chamber and catching them in its beam. "We have company," he announced calmly. "Mr. Miller, I presume, and Dr. Ahmadi. What a predictable development." Harrison and Chen turned, surprise evident on their faces. Walsh, however, showed no sign of being startled by their presence. "This is private property," Jacob said firmly, stepping forward. "You're trespassing." "Actually," Walsh replied, "this chamber and its contents fall under the jurisdiction of the Heritage Protection Act, Section 11, which grants the Foundation emergency assessment rights for discoveries of exceptional historical significance. Your ownership of the surface property doesn't extend to archaeological finds of this magnitude." Dr. Ahmadi moved to stand beside Jacob. "The Heritage Protection Act requires proper notification and court approval before any access, Director." "Walsh, you've done neither." Walsh's expression remained impassive. "Dr. Ahmadi, still challenging institutional authority, I see. Your dismissal from Princeton was unfortunate but necessary. Some discoveries require proper contextual management rather than immediate academic disclosure." "You mean suppression?" she replied evenly. "The Foundation has been burying evidence of advanced ancient technology for decades." Jacob glanced between them, realizing they had a history, and that Dr. Ahmadi knew far more about these people than she had initially revealed. "Mr. Miller," Walsh said, turning his attention to Jacob. Dr. Ahmadi's perspective is distorted by her ideological commitment to open access regardless of consequences. The Foundation for Historical Truth has been protecting sites like this for over a century, ensuring they're studied appropriately rather than sensationalized or misinterpreted. The name struck Jacob immediately. The Foundation for Historical Truth, almost identical to the Order of Historical Truth his great-grandmother had written about. The confirmation that this was indeed the same organization, operating continuously for over a century, was chilling. My great-grandmother documented your organization's attempts to seize control of this land dating back to 1901, Jacob said. Your protection looks a lot like appropriation from where I'm standing. Walsh's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his composed demeanor. Your great-grandmother, Sophia Miller. He spoke the name with reluctant respect. A remarkable woman who unfortunately lacked the contextual understanding to appreciate what she had discovered. The Foundation offered fair compensation and continued involvement, just as we're prepared to do with you. Dr. Ahmadi stepped forward. Jacob, the technology in the secondary chamber is active, responding to specific stimuli. If my calculations are correct, we're approaching an astronomical alignment similar to what would have been observed when this site was constructed. That's why they're here now, why they've accelerated their timetable. Walsh studied her with cold assessment. Your analytical abilities remain impressive, Dr. Ahmadi. Indeed, in approximately 72 hours, a specific celestial configuration will occur, one that happens only every 432 years. The mechanism is already responding to the approaching alignment. What exactly is this place? Jacob demanded. What does the mechanism do? For the first time, a slight smile appeared on Walsh's face. It's a key, Mr. Miller, one of 7 known to exist across the globe. Each activates during specific astronomical alignments, accessing what we believe to be a repository of knowledge from a civilization that predates all known historical records. A library, Dr. Ahmadi said quietly. Not aliens or supernatural forces, as popular speculation would suggest, but an advanced human civilization that recognized its own impending collapse and created these repositories to preserve their knowledge. Precisely. Walsh nodded. The Foundation has documented partial activations at 3 other sites. Each revealed scientific principles and historical information that, if released prematurely, would destabilize established academic and religious frameworks. We preserve this knowledge until humanity is prepared to receive it. And you decide. When humanity is ready, Jacob asked skeptically. Someone must, Walsh replied simply. Now, we have a proposal. Cooperate with our documentation efforts, sign the access agreement we've prepared, and you'll receive both fair compensation and the opportunity to participate in controlled study of the site. Resist, and will be forced to pursue emergency court orders based on the historical significance of the discovery. Jacob exchanged a glance with Dr. Ahmadi, whose subtle head shake cautioned against immediate acceptance of Walsh's offer. He turned back to Walsh, buying time as he considered their options. I'd need to review any agreement with my lawyer, he said, and I'd want independent verification of your claims about this site's significance. A reasonable request, Walsh conceded, though his expression suggested impatience. Dr. Chen can provide a preliminary briefing on what we've learned from similar repositories while we continue documentation. Dr. Chen seemed uncomfortable with her assigned role, but stepped forward professionally. Mr. Miller, Dr. Ahmadi, the Foundation has identified 7 sites globally with similar architectural and technological characteristics. 3 in the Americas, 2 in Asia, 1 in Europe, and 1 in North Africa. Each contains mechanisms that activate during specific astronomical alignments unique to that location. As she spoke, Walsh and Harrison returned to examining the central platform, scanning the geometric structures with specialized equipment. Their focus on documentation gave Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi an opportunity to converse quietly while appearing to listen to Dr. Chen. "He's telling partial truths," Dr. Ahmadi whispered. "The Foundation does study these sites, but they suppress crucial findings and restrict access to a small circle of initiates. Can we trust Chen?" Jacob asked under his breath. "Possibly. She's new to their inner circle, recruited for her expertise in archaeoastronomy. She may not be fully indoctrinated into their philosophy." Dr. Chen continued her explanation, seemingly unaware of their whispered exchange. "The repositories appear to have been created by a pre-cataclysmic civilization that recognized an impending global disaster, likely the rapid climate shifts that occurred at the end of the last ice age, approximately 11,600 years ago." She gestured toward the geometric structures. "These aren't merely symbolic objects. They're information storage devices, utilizing principles that combine aspects of crystalline matrices and what might be described as analog computing. The central dodecahedron appears to function as the primary interface." Walsh called over to them. "Dr. Chen, we need your expertise with the orientation calculations. Mr. Miller, Dr. Ahmadi, feel free to observe, but please don't touch anything. These mechanisms are more fragile than they appear." As Dr. Chen joined her colleagues, Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi moved toward the secondary chamber, maintaining the appearance of casual exploration while creating some distance for private conversation. "We need to document everything independently," Dr. Ahmadi said once they were in the passage between chambers. "The Foundation will control the narrative if they're the only ones with comprehensive data." "I have an idea," Jacob replied. "My great-grandmother's artifact, the disc with rotating rings. It projected a star chart when properly aligned. What if it's connected to this site? A key of some kind?" Dr. Ahmadi's eyes widened. "Where is it now?" "In my house. If we could retrieve it." Their planning was interrupted by an exclamation from the main chamber. Dr. Chen's voice carried clearly through the passage. "Director, these readings are unprecedented. The energy signatures are orders of magnitude stronger than what we observed at the Yucatan site." They hurried back to find all three Foundation members gathered around the central dodecahedron, which now emitted a visible blue luminescence. The other geometric structures remained inert, but the scanning equipment displayed readings that clearly excited the researchers. "It's responding to the approaching alignment already," Harrison said, his academic demeanor giving way to almost childlike wonder. 3 days before the optimal configuration. Walsh turned to Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi, his expression more animated than before. "Mr. Miller, the situation has evolved. This repository is far more active than we anticipated. We need to establish proper monitoring protocols immediately." Dr. Chen was studying her readouts with growing amazement. "The internal structure is reconfiguring, preparing for activation. I've never seen anything like this. The crystalline matrices are forming new patterns without any physical manipulation." As they watched, the luminescence within the dodecahedron intensified, projecting faint patterns of light onto the chamber walls. Complex geometric shapes that shifted and evolved like living mathematics. "It's a language," Dr. Ahmadi breathed. "Not symbolic representation, but direct mathematical communication." Harrison nodded in reluctant agreement. "Your assessment aligns with our findings at other sites, Dr. Ahmadi. These projections appear to be fundamental mathematical principles, universal constants expressed through geometric relationships." The revelation that the chamber was actively communicating, that they were witnessing the beginning stages of whatever activation process the ancient builders had designed, transformed the atmosphere from tense standoff to shared scientific wonder. Dr. Chen continued monitoring her equipment, providing running commentary as new data emerged. The energy signatures are completely novel, not electromagnetic in any conventional sense. They appear to interact with quantum fields in ways our instruments can barely detect, let alone quantify. This is merely the preliminary phase, Walsh added, his tone suggesting both excitement and caution. Based on our observations at other sites, the full activation during peak alignment will be significantly more dramatic. Jacob, seeing an opportunity in their distraction, turned to Dr. Ahmadi. I need to retrieve the artifact from the house. It might be crucial to understanding this activation process. Before she could respond, the chamber experienced a momentary power fluctuation, all their electronic equipment briefly shutting down before restarting. The dodecahedron's luminescence pulsed in response, briefly intensifying before returning to its previous state. What was that? Jacob asked. Dr. Chen checked her readings. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but localized entirely within this chamber. It reset our equipment without damaging it, almost like a deliberate system response. Walsh turned to Harrison. Accelerate the timetable. Contact the extraction team and have them prepare for immediate deployment of the containment. Equipment. The directive caught Jacob's attention. Extraction team, containment equipment. You said this was about documentation. Walsh's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Miller, this repository is far more active than we anticipated. For safety and security reasons, the central interface mechanism must be relocated to our research facility, where it can be properly monitored during activation. You're planning to remove artifacts, Jacob challenged. That's archaeological theft, no matter how you justify it. Dr. Ahmadi stepped forward. Director Walsh, removing components from an integrated system like this could destabilize the entire mechanism. The repositories appear designed to function in their specific geographic locations, aligned with particular astronomical coordinates. Our research indicates the central interface can be safely extracted, Walsh countered. The Yucatan components have been studied in our facility for decades without incident. This revelation seemed to surprise even Dr. Chen. You've removed components from other sites. That wasn't in any of the research briefings I received. Need to know protocols, Dr. Chen, Walsh replied dismissively. The Foundation compartmentalizes information for security reasons. The tension in the chamber was palpable now, scientific collaboration giving way once more to competing agendas. Jacob realized that Walsh had never intended mere documentation. The Foundation planned to take control of the site's most significant components all along. As the property owner, I do not consent to removal of anything from this chamber, Jacob stated firmly. Walsh's response was coldly pragmatic. Your consent, while preferable, is not legally required under the emergency provisions of the Heritage Protection Act. We've already filed the necessary documentation. Dr. Chen appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the direction events were taking. She stepped slightly away from her colleagues, her loyalties visibly conflicted. If I might suggest, she said carefully, we should complete full in-situ documentation before attempting any extraction. This activation sequence is unique and should be recorded in its original context. Jacob seized on this reasonable proposal. I agree with Dr. Chen. Nothing should be moved until we fully understand what we're dealing with. At minimum, that requires observing the complete activation cycle during the alignment in 3 days. Walsh considered this, clearly weighing the scientific value against his organizational directives. Conditional agreement, he finally said. We'll continue documentation through the initial phase of alignment, but security protocols require us to maintain control of access to this site until our assessment is complete. Meaning what exactly? Jacob asked. Meaning, Mr. Miller, that while you're welcome to observe and participate in the documentation process, The Foundation will establish a security perimeter around this section of your property, for your safety as much as for site protection. The thinly veiled declaration that they were taking control of his property raised Jacob's anger, but Dr. Amadi placed a warning hand on his arm. "We understand your concerns, Director Walsh," she said diplomatically. "Perhaps a compromise is possible. Joint monitoring teams, shared data access, and no removal of artifacts until peer review can be arranged with independent experts." Walsh's response to Dr. Amadi's proposed compromise was a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The Foundation has protocols for discoveries of this magnitude, developed over a century of experience. While I appreciate your input, Dr. Amadi, we'll proceed according to established guidelines." He turned to Harrison. "Contact the security team. I want a perimeter established within the hour." Jacob stepped forward, his patience exhausted. "This is still my property. You can't just—" "Actually, Mr. Miller," Walsh interrupted, "we can and will take necessary measures to secure this site. Your cooperation would make the process more pleasant for everyone, but it's not required." The tense standoff was interrupted by Dr. Chen, who had been monitoring her equipment. "Director, something's changing. The energy signatures are fluctuating. In a new pattern, all attention turned to the central dodecahedron, which had begun pulsing with increased intensity. The geometric structures surrounding it remained dormant, but the patterns projected onto the chamber walls had become more complex, shifting through mathematical relationships with accelerating speed. "It's responding to our presence," Dr. Amadi suggested, studying the projections. "Perhaps to our conflict. These patterns appear to be expressing something like conditional statements. If, then relationships." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. "The system is adaptive, responding to stimuli in its environment. Our equipment is registering what might be described as queries, directed at specific instruments." Walsh and Harrison exchanged concerned glances. "Containment protocols may be necessary sooner than anticipated," Walsh said quietly. During this exchange, Jacob caught Dr. Amadi's eye and subtly gestured toward the entrance shaft. She gave a nearly imperceptible nod of understanding. They needed to retrieve the artifact from the house and potentially seek outside help before the Foundation could fully secure the site. "I need to check on my dog," Jacob announced, moving toward the shaft. "He's been alone all day." Walsh regarded him suspiciously. "Harrison, accompany Mr. Miller to the surface. Ensure he understands the sensitivity of what he's witnessed here." Jacob bristled at the implied threat, but recognized the opportunity. At least one of them could reach the surface. He turned to Dr. Amadi. "Will you be all right down here?" "I'll continue documenting the projections," she replied calmly. "They represent mathematical principles I've been studying for years." As Jacob and Harrison ascended the shaft, Dr. Chen continued her analysis, occasionally directing questions to Dr. Amadi that revealed a genuine scientific curiosity that appeared to transcend Foundation protocols. Walsh monitored their interaction with thinly veiled impatience, more focused on securing the site than understanding its mysteries. On reaching the surface, Jacob was alarmed to see two unmarked black SUVs already parked near his truck, with 4 men in tactical gear unloading equipment. The Foundation's security team had arrived with remarkable speed, suggesting they had been stationed nearby, waiting for the call. "Your property will be accessible to you, Mr. Miller," Harrison said, noting his concern. "We're merely securing the archaeological site with armed personnel," Jacob challenged, eyeing their holstered weapons. "Standard protocol for protecting invaluable historical discoveries," Harrison replied smoothly, "particularly ones with technological components that could be damaged or stolen." As they walked toward the farmhouse, Jacob noticed Rusty watching. anxiously from the porch, clearly disturbed by the strangers on the property. Harrison accompanied him inside, making no attempt to disguise his surveillance role. "I need to feed my dog and grab some supplies if I'm going to be part of this documentation process," Jacob said, moving toward the kitchen where he had left Sophia's artifacts on the table. To his dismay, the table was empty. The journals, measuring instruments, and crucially, the star-projecting disc were gone. "Looking for something?" Harrison asked, his tone suggesting he knew exactly what was missing. Jacob controlled his expression with effort. "Just some notes I'd made. Must have put them somewhere else." Director Walsh had a team secure any relevant historical materials from the house while we were conducting our initial survey, Harrison explained. "For proper cataloguing and preservation, of course. They'll be returned once our assessment is complete." The calculated move confirmed Jacob's worst suspicions about the Foundation's intentions. They had been systematically outmaneuvering him from the beginning, anticipating his actions before he took them. "I see," he said neutrally, focusing on filling Rusty's food bowl to hide his anger. "And how long do you expect this assessment to take?" "Difficult to say," Harrison replied. "Given the unusual activity levels in the repository, we're establishing more comprehensive monitoring than originally planned. The full team should arrive by morning." As Jacob gathered some personal items and food for what was clearly going to be an extended situation, he noticed a small slip of paper that had fallen between the refrigerator and counter, overlooked by whoever had cleared the table. He casually retrieved it while appearing to pick up a dropped dog treat. It was a fragment torn from one of Sophia's journals, containing what appeared to be coordinates and a hastily sketched diagram of the eastern section of the property, with an X marking a location several hundred yards from the current shaft, the original entrance, Jacob realized. His great-grandmother had documented the location of the access point she had discovered and subsequently concealed. "Something wrong?" Harrison asked, noting his momentary stillness. "Just tired," Jacob replied, pocketing the paper surreptitiously. "It's been an overwhelming day." When they returned to the drilling site, the security team had already established a controlled perimeter with portable lights, monitoring equipment, and what appeared to be a small command center being assembled in a tactical tent. Professional and efficient, they had transformed a corner of his farm into a secured compound in less than an hour. Jacob descended the shaft again, finding the chamber significantly changed in his absence. Additional equipment had been set up around the central platform, with cables running to monitoring stations where both Dr. Chen and Dr. Ahmadi were recording data. The dodecahedron's pulsing had intensified, now casting shifting blue-white patterns across the entire chamber. Dr. Ahmadi caught his eye briefly, her subtle head shake, warning him not to speak openly about anything important. Walsh was directing the installation of what appeared to be some kind of containment framework around the central platform, a modular system clearly designed for eventual extraction of the geometric structures. "Mr. Miller," Walsh acknowledged his return, without looking up from his work. "Your timing is fortunate. The repository's activation cycle has accelerated significantly in the past hour. Dr. Chen believes it may be responding to increased human presence, perhaps recognizing multiple observers for the first time in millennia." Dr. Chen glanced up from her instruments. "The mathematical patterns suggest a communication attempt, not just passive information display, but active engagement. It's as if the system is trying to determine if we're suitable recipients for whatever knowledge it contains." "Recipients? Chosen by what criteria?" Jacob asked, genuinely curious, despite his suspicion of the Foundation. "That's the critical question," Dr. Ahmadi interjected. The patterns contain ethical constructs embedded within the mathematical frameworks, suggesting the knowledge might be restricted based on the intentions of those seeking access. Walsh frowned slightly at this interpretation. A poetic, but unlikely hypothesis. These are sophisticated but ultimately mechanical systems, not moral arbiters. With respect, Director, Dr. Chen said cautiously, the response patterns show clear adaptation to our activities. When your team began installing the containment framework, the energy signatures exhibited what could only be described as defensive modulation. Meaning what exactly? Harrison asked, having followed Jacob back into the chamber. Meaning, Dr. Chen replied, that it may be responding negatively to perceived threats. The system appears designed with protective protocols, perhaps to prevent misuse of the knowledge it contains. This observation created visible tension among the Foundation team. Walsh studied the readings on Dr. Chen's equipment for several moments before coming to a decision. Accelerate the containment preparations, he ordered. If the system has security protocols, we need to establish control parameters before full activation occurs. Jacob exchanged another glance with Dr. Ahmadi, recognizing that the situation was escalating toward a critical point. The Foundation was preparing to seize the repository components by force if necessary, regardless of potential consequences. As the Foundation team focused on setting up their equipment, Jacob found an opportunity to approach Dr. Ahmadi while checking power connections near her monitoring station. They took Sophia's artifacts, he whispered, but I found something they missed, coordinates for what might be the original entrance my great-grandmother discovered. Dr. Ahmadi continued typing data notes while responding quietly. Walsh has assigned security personnel to both of us. We'll need a distraction to investigate. Not just security, Jacob murmured. They've taken control of my property. There's a whole tactical team setting up on the surface. Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Chen, who approached with a tablet displaying new readings. You both should see this, she said, her voice professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying deeper concern. The tablet showed 2 data streams, the official readings being logged to Foundation servers, and a separate analysis Dr. Chen had been conducting privately. The second analysis revealed patterns the official monitoring was either missing or deliberately not recording. The system is establishing connections with other repositories, she said softly. There's a communication protocol activating between sites that hasn't been documented in any Foundation research I've accessed. Jacob studied the data, not fully understanding the technical details, but grasping the significance. It's networking with other sites, globally? Dr. Chen nodded. Based on these energy signatures, at least 3 other repositories are responding to this one's activation sequence. The pattern suggests preparation for a coordinated function we haven't observed before. Dr. Ahmadi examined the readings closely. These are quantum entanglement markers, impossible by conventional scientific understanding for the time period. This civilization had mastered principles of physics we're only beginning to theorize about. Why are you showing us this? Jacob asked directly, sensing Dr. Chen's internal conflict. She glanced toward Walsh, who was occupied directing the containment team on the far side of the chamber. Because the Foundation's records are incomplete by design, they compartmentalize information, restricting complete understanding to a select inner circle. What I've pieced together suggests they may not fully comprehend the integrated nature of these repositories. Or worse, they understand but are willing to risk destabilizing the entire network to gain control of individual components. This revelation confirmed Jacob's suspicions while raising the stakes dramatically. If the chamber beneath his farm was actively communicating with similar sites worldwide, attempts to remove components could have far-reaching consequences beyond his property. Dr. Chen, Walsh called from across the chamber, we need your assessment of these power fluctuations. She gave them a meaningful look before returning to her assigned duties. Once she was out of earshot, Dr. Ahmadi whispered, "She's giving us critical information at personal risk. The Foundation doesn't tolerate internal dissent. Her career, and possibly more, are in jeopardy." Jacob nodded grimly. "We need to find that original entrance. If we can access the chamber independently, we might have leverage." As the night progressed, the dodecahedron's activity continued to intensify. The mathematical projections evolved into increasingly complex patterns, eventually resolving into what appeared to be star maps, three-dimensional representations of celestial bodies floating in the chamber air. "Extraordinary," Dr. Ahmadi breathed, watching as the projection displayed star systems in configurations unfamiliar to modern astronomy. These appear to be historical star positions, showing celestial alignments from thousands of years in the past, progressing forward through time. Even Walsh seemed momentarily captivated by the display, his containment preparations temporarily forgotten as the chamber filled with glowing stellar cartography spanning millennia. Dr. Chen's instruments captured the progression, her analysis, running in parallel with the official Foundation documentation. It's showing astronomical shifts over approximately 12,000 years, she reported, tracking specific star systems with remarkable precision. The projection accelerated, star positions shifting rapidly until they aligned with recognizable modern configurations, then continued forward, displaying future alignments predicted with mathematical certainty. It's not just a historical record, Dr. Ahmadi realized. It's demonstrating predictive astronomical knowledge, showing celestial movements thousands of years into the future. As they watched in amazement, the projection highlighted a specific configuration, a particular alignment that the system was emphasizing through increased luminescence and mathematical notations. "That's the upcoming alignment," Dr. Chen confirmed, checking her calculations. "The one occurring in 3 days, but there's something else." She studied the projection with growing concern. The system is highlighting gravitational anomalies associated with this specific alignment, factors not accounted for in our current astronomical models. Walsh moved quickly to her station. "Meaning what exactly?" Dr. Chen hesitated, clearly uncertain about sharing her preliminary conclusion. "Meaning this alignment may have effects beyond what modern science anticipates. The repository appears to be warning about, or preparing for, some kind of significant astronomical event." The revelation cast the Foundation's containment efforts in an even more troubling light. They weren't just attempting to control an archaeological discovery. They were potentially interfering with a system designed to respond to an imminent celestial event of unknown consequences. As midnight approached, Walsh ordered a shift rotation, allowing half the team to rest while maintaining continuous monitoring. This created an opportunity Jacob had been waiting for. "I need to check on my dog and get some sleep if I'm going to be any use tomorrow," he told Harrison, who had been assigned as his shadow. Harrison nodded. "I'll accompany you to the house." "Actually," Dr. Chen interjected, "I need Mr. Miller's assistance with localizing some of these energy readings first. The system appears to be responding differently to him than to Foundation personnel." Harrison hesitated, clearly weighing his orders against Dr. Chen's scientific authority. 30 minutes, he finally conceded. "Then I escort him to the surface." Once Harrison had moved to consult with Walsh, Dr. Chen led Jacob and Dr. Ahmadi to a monitoring station positioned near the passage to the secondary chamber, ostensibly to check readings, but actually creating a pocket of relative privacy. "The Foundation is planning to extract the central components at dawn," she whispered, adjusting equipment settings to mask their conversation. "They're concerned about the acceleration in the system's activation sequence and want the dodecahedron secured in their facility before the alignment intensifies further. That's insanity, Dr. Amadi replied. The repositories appear designed to function in specific geographical locations. Removing components could destabilize the entire network. Dr. Chen nodded. I've tried explaining this to Director Walsh, but he's following protocols established by the Foundation's inner council. They believe they can control the activation process in an isolated environment. Jacob showed them the paper fragment with Sophia's coordinates. My great-grandmother found another entrance, one the Foundation doesn't know about. If we can locate it, Dr. Chen studied the coordinates. Based on the chamber's dimensions, this would access the secondary chamber, bypassing the main entrance. And currently under Foundation control. She glanced at the security team. But how would you search for it without being observed? They've established a perimeter around the entire eastern section. I know every inch of this property, Jacob said, including drainage ditches and old fence lines that don't appear on surveys. If I can get to the house with Rusty, I might find a way to circle back. Dr. Amadi considered this. You'll need a substantial distraction, and will need to coordinate timing precisely given the Foundation's extraction plans. As they spoke, the dodecahedron pulsed with increasing intensity, projecting new mathematical sequences across the chamber walls. Dr. Chen's equipment registered the change immediately. The activation cycle is accelerating again, she reported, loud enough for Harrison to hear, maintaining the pretense of legitimate research. Then, quietly to Jacob and Dr. Amadi, this actually works in our favor. The increasing energy outputs will require Walsh to reassign personnel to monitoring and containment preparation. What exactly happens during full activation? Jacob asked. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. Based on partial observations at other sites, the repository creates what the Foundation calls a knowledge interface, a direct transfer of information that can be perceived by human consciousness. Not just data, but comprehensive understanding of principles beyond our current science, which is why the Foundation wants to control who receives this knowledge, Dr. Amadi added. Information that could transform energy production, physics, possibly even medicine or consciousness itself. The Foundation believes exposure should be limited to properly prepared recipients, Dr. Chen confirmed. Individuals they've selected and vetted according to their criteria for psychological stability and ethical alignment, meaning people who share their worldview, Jacob translated. Dr. Chen didn't disagree. I joined the Foundation, believing in their mission to protect transformative knowledge from misuse. But I'm increasingly concerned they're more interested in control than protection. Their planning was interrupted as Harrison approached. Time's up. Mr. Miller needs to get some rest before the full team arrives tomorrow. On the surface, Jacob found the security perimeter had expanded, with additional personnel and equipment arriving continuously. The Foundation was mobilizing significant resources to secure the site, suggesting the discovery held even greater importance than they had acknowledged. As Harrison escorted him to the farmhouse, Jacob surreptitiously surveyed the property, identifying potential blind spots in the perimeter. Rusty greeted him enthusiastically, providing a natural excuse to take the dog outside one last time before sleep. He needs his evening walk, Jacob explained to Harrison. Just around the yard. Harrison accompanied them, but remained at a distance as Jacob let Rusty lead him around familiar paths near the house. The dog's behavior provided perfect cover, stopping to investigate scents, circling back unpredictably, allowing Jacob to note security positions without obvious observation. Inside the house, Jacob found a notification on his phone that he'd missed several calls from Diana Reynolds at Nexus Development. Whatever corporate interest they had represented initially was clearly connected to the Foundation's activities. the realization that multiple powerful entities had been monitoring his property for years, awaiting the right moment to seize control, strengthened his resolve to protect his family's legacy. Unable to risk explicit communication, Jacob prepared for bed while formulating his plan. He would need to slip away during pre-dawn hours, when security would be at its lowest strength, before the Foundation's full extraction team arrived. Finding Sophia's original entrance would be challenging with only approximate coordinates, but it represented their best hope of gaining leverage against the Foundation's overwhelming resources. As he finally lay down, exhaustion competing with determination, Jacob's phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number: equipment anomalies requiring full system recalibration at 0430. Security rotation scheduled for 0415. Eastern drainage culvert remains unmonitored. C. Dr. Chen had created their opportunity. Now they just had to execute the plan perfectly, with the Foundation's team watching their every move and the mysterious repository beneath his farm accelerating toward an activation event with unknown consequences. Jacob woke at 4:30 a.m., giving himself time to prepare before Dr. Chen's promised distraction. He dressed in dark clothes and quietly opened his bedroom window, bypassing the Foundation's security member stationed in the hallway outside his room. With Rusty following silently, he slipped through the shadows of his property, using the dog's superior night vision and familiar knowledge of the terrain to avoid detection. The eastern drainage culvert, a concrete tunnel running beneath an old farm road, provided perfect cover for moving beyond the immediate security perimeter. Once clear, Jacob consulted Sophia's coordinates, orienting himself using the distinctive silhouette of an ancient oak tree that had stood on the property for generations. The location his great-grandmother had marked was now overgrown with dense brush, explaining why it had remained undiscovered for so long. As promised, at precisely 4:30 a.m., distant alarms sounded from the main excavation site, drawing security personnel's attention away from the perimeter. Jacob worked quickly, clearing decades of accumulated soil and vegetation from what appeared to be a natural rock formation. Only when he removed a particular stone, one that seemed oddly regular compared to those surrounding it, did the cleverly disguised entrance reveal itself. A narrow vertical shaft with ancient iron handholds embedded in its wall. With Rusty standing guard above, Jacob descended into darkness, following the passage that angled gently downward before opening into the now familiar secondary chamber with its astronomical mechanism. As he emerged from the hidden entrance, he was startled to find Dr. Ahmadi already waiting. Dr. Chen's distraction worked perfectly, she explained quickly. I told Walsh I needed to check sensor readings in this chamber, and he was too focused on the equipment failures to assign an escort. Before they could formulate their next move, lights appeared in the main passage. Foundation security had responded faster than anticipated. Jacob barely had time to conceal himself in the shadows of the mechanism before Walsh entered with 2 security personnel. Dr. Ahmadi, what exactly are you doing in here without authorization? Walsh demanded, his patience clearly exhausted. Following energy fluctuations that your equipment was ignoring, she replied calmly. The secondary mechanism is showing synchronization patterns with the main chamber. Removing any components now would be catastrophically irresponsible. Walsh stepped closer to the mechanism, studying its increasingly active state. Your concern is noted, but irrelevant. The extraction team arrives in 1 hour, and the primary interface will be secured in our facility by noon. Director Walsh, a new voice called from the passage entrance. Dr. Chen appeared, tablet in hand, looking both anxious and determined. You need to see this immediately. She held out the tablet, displaying what appeared to be an official communication. Walsh's expression changed as he read it, moving from irritation to disbelief, and finally to carefully controlled anger. This is impossible, he stated flatly. "The Oversight Council has no authority to countermand a special directive. They do when 7 simultaneous repository activations have been detected globally," Dr. Chen replied. "The pattern suggests a synchronized event that could be destabilized by interference with any single node. The Council has ordered all extraction activities suspended pending full network analysis." Jacob remained hidden, recognizing a power struggle unfolding between different factions within the Foundation itself. The mention of simultaneous activations worldwide confirmed Dr. Chen's earlier theory. All 7 repositories were preparing for coordinated function during the approaching alignment. Walsh studied Dr. Chen with cold assessment. "You contacted the Council directly, bypassing operational chain of command. That's a serious breach of protocol, Dr. Chen." The next 48 hours transformed Oakridge Farm into something between a scientific research station and a secured compound. The Foundation's extraction plans had been officially halted, but Walsh maintained control of the site, establishing an uneasy cooperation with Dr. Chen, Dr. Ahmadi, and Jacob, who had revealed his presence during the confrontation, explaining the alternative entrance as proof of his family's historical connection to the repository. As the celestial alignment approached, the repository's activation accelerated dramatically. Both chambers now pulsed with blue-white energy, the mathematical projections evolving into increasingly complex representations. Scientists from the Oversight Council arrived, establishing independent monitoring alongside the Foundation's equipment. "The energy signatures are synchronized across all 7 global sites," reported Dr. Chen, monitoring real-time data from repositories in Peru, Egypt, China, Turkey, Ireland, and Cambodia. "They're establishing quantum entanglement at a level our instruments can barely measure." In the hours before the exact alignment, the underground chambers became crowded with observers, Foundation personnel, Council scientists, and even representatives from indigenous nations with historical connections to the land invited by the Council despite Walsh's objections. Jacob stood with Dr. Ahmadi near the central platform, watching as the dodecahedron's pulsations synchronized with the geometric structures surrounding it, which had finally begun to activate as well. Each stone shape now emitted its own pattern of light, creating overlapping fields that interacted in mathematically precise ways. "It's preparing for complete activation," Dr. Ahmadi explained. "The patterns suggest it's calibrating to ensure optimal information transfer during the alignment." Walsh maintained a professional demeanor despite his thwarted extraction plans, directing his team to document everything while clearly planning how to reassert control once the event concluded. The Council's scientists worked separately, their focus more on understanding than controlling. As the exact moment of alignment approached, Jacob noticed something remarkable. The artifact he had found in Sophia's chest, the disc with rotating rings that projected star charts, was being used by Council scientists as an interface device. They had discovered it among the items the Foundation had confiscated from his house. "It's a key," Dr. Chen explained, seeing his interest. "Each repository has associated artifacts that function as access devices, allowing controlled interaction with the knowledge systems. Your great-grandmother somehow obtained one, which explains her unusual understanding of the site. When the alignment reached its peak, the effect was unlike anything Jacob could have imagined. The entire chamber transformed, the solid walls seeming to dissolve into pure mathematical space. The dodecahedron at the center expanded its projection field until it encompassed everyone present, surrounding them with multidimensional representations of scientific principles beyond current human understanding. "It's not just showing us," Dr. Ahmadi whispered in awe. "It's teaching us." The information transfer was overwhelming, yet somehow comprehensible, as if the ancient system was carefully calibrating its output to match the cognitive capabilities of those present. Complex principles of physics, astronomy, energy manipulation, and consciousness itself unfolded in layers of understanding that bypassed normal learning processes. Most remarkable was the repository's central revelation. The approaching alignment wouldn't just enable knowledge transfer but would trigger a measurable shift in Earth's electromagnetic field, one that occurred in 432-year cycles. The ancient builders had created the repositories to help future civilizations navigate these transition periods, providing both warning and knowledge to mitigate potential disruptions. They knew, Dr. Chen said softly, absorbing the information along with everyone present. They experienced one of these transitions and created this system to preserve essential knowledge through the collapse of their own civilization. For 6 hours, as the alignment peaked and gradually subsided, the repository continued its unprecedented knowledge transfer, permanently altering the understanding of everyone present. Foundation protocols on information control became meaningless in the face of direct, unmediated comprehension that couldn't be selectively redacted or restricted. 6 months after the alignment event at Oakridge Farm, the world had begun to experience the first ripples of transformation from what was now commonly called the Celestial Archive. The knowledge transfer had affected not just those present in the chambers, but had been simultaneously experienced at all 7 repository sites globally, directly reaching hundreds of scientists, government officials, indigenous representatives, and civilians like Jacob who happened to be connected to the sites. While the Foundation had initially attempted to maintain information control through confidentiality agreements and restricted access, the nature of the knowledge transfer made this impossible. Those who experienced it didn't just receive information, they gained comprehensive understanding that could be applied, developed, and shared through normal scientific channels. For Jacob, the outcome was both personal and profound. The cooperative stewardship agreement negotiated in the weeks following the event granted him continued ownership of Oakridge Farm with specific protections for the archaeological site beneath it. More importantly, the repository itself had solved his original water crisis. The knowledge transfer had included detailed hydrological mapping of the aquifer beneath his property and sustainable extraction methodologies that allowed precise well placement without depleting the resource. "Your great-grandmother would be proud," Dr. Ahmadi told him as they walked the now thriving fields of Oakridge Farm. The summer crop was the best in decades, nourished by water from the precisely placed new well and farming techniques adapted. From the repository's agricultural knowledge, she protected it for generations without fully understanding what she was guarding, Jacob replied. "I'm just glad it's finally serving its purpose." The Foundation had undergone significant restructuring following the event. Walsh had been reassigned to administrative duties far from field operations, while the Oversight Council had implemented new transparency protocols that transformed the organization's approach to ancient knowledge. Dr. Chen now led a multinational research team focused on integrating the repository's scientific principles into modern frameworks. Beyond Oakridge Farm, the wider implications were still unfolding. The repositories had provided specific warning about the electromagnetic shift that would accompany the alignment, a phenomenon that could have disrupted global communications and power systems if unexpected. Armed with this knowledge, governments worldwide had implemented preemptive measures that prevented potential catastrophe. More profoundly, the scientific principles revealed by the repositories had already sparked revolutions in multiple fields. Energy researchers were developing technologies based on principles that allowed more efficient capture and storage of renewable sources. Medical scientists were exploring new understandings of cellular processes that promised treatments for previously incurable conditions. Physicists were reformulating fundamental theories to incorporate the repository's more comprehensive models of universal forces. Perhaps most significant was the historical revelation, irrefutable evidence of an advanced global civilization that had flourished more than 12,000 years ago, developing along different technological paths than modern society, but achieving remarkable sophistication. This knowledge fundamentally transformed archaeological understanding and cultural narratives about human capabilities and our shared heritage. It wasn't aliens or supernatural intervention, Dr. Ahmadi explained during a lecture that Jacob attended at the newly established Archive Research Center built near his property. It was us, human ancestors, who developed profound understanding through careful observation and mathematical insight, following different pathways than our industrial civilization chose. For Jacob, watching his rejuvenated farm flourish while researchers respectfully studied the repository beneath it, the most meaningful outcome was the validation of his family's legacy. Sophia Miller hadn't been a superstitious eccentric, but a prescient guardian who recognized the importance of what lay beneath her land, protecting it until humanity was ready to receive its wisdom. As he stood at the edge of his property one evening, watching the same stars that had guided those ancient builders, Jacob reflected on how his desperate search for water had uncovered something far more valuable. A wellspring of knowledge that would nourish humanity's future, just as the new well nourished his fields. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.